all of a sudden there was this rushing sound by the submarine, and it didn't disturb the water because we didn't feel it get rustled around. But the senior master chief came out of sonar and said that something had gone by us that was huge, and it was moving, he thought, faster than the speed of sound in air, but it was so far underwater it would have nothing we know how to do on the earth can move an object underwater at that speed.
You had mentioned that potentially they were somewhere working on something, and you think maybe Tim borrowed Chris's download and started a company, kind of like yours that you did.
I don't know whether I know this. Chris helped him with some medical stuff in Tim Taylor's laboratory. And subsequent to that, Taylor made a fortune, and Chris Bledsoe got none of it.
You think so? You're saying Tim Taylor potentially briefed President Obama at Camp David about this envelope that Chris Bledsoe had sent,
which contained a description of Chris's experience and his prediction for the future.
My guest today is Bob McGwier. He goes online by Science Bob McGwier. And right here you can see just how smart he is. Now, in today's episode, Bob is going to be bringing up two of his USO stories. That's right, Bob has been talking about USOs since before it was cool to talk about. Now, in the late 90s, Bob experienced a USO sighting aboard a submarine on a classified mission, essentially, because Bob held a top secret security clearance in the government for 44 years, even reaching Q clearance, top secret clearance, which is the top clearance you can get, right? That's what they call it, top secret, I guess, not middle secret. Anyway, whatever. Regardless, in this episode, we are going to be talking about a lot of things. So be prepared. We're going to be talking about Grant Cameron, Tim Taylor, Chris Bledsoe, Lou Elizondo, Garry Nolan, all kinds of people. So stay tuned. This is going to be a great episode. Let's jump in. All right, everyone. Welcome to Vetted. Look who I have in the house, Mr. Science Bob. Is it McGwier? Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Awesome. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Patrick.
We met in an X space. I have known about you, and I found out you had also seen some Vetted videos. But we were talking in an X space that in the topic of this gentleman named Tim Taylor came up, and I do want to get into some of the stuff that we talked about him. But before we get into anything and, some of your past experiences as well, I wanted just people to get to know you a little bit, and even myself, like a little bit of your background. Where'd you grow up, Bob?
I was born in Lebanon, Tennessee, which is 35 miles east of Nashville on I-40. And then when I was one, my parents moved me to Southwest Alabama, where my father's parents had started a furniture manufacturing facility, and my father went to help them run it. So I grew up then for the next 18 and a half years. I grew up in Southwest Alabama, and I left, went to college, and basically never returned.
You were out. That was it. No, that's
great. I escaped.
You escaped. Yeah, that's funny. So, how did you get into, I guess that's a typical question in the UFO community, right? Like, how did you get into the UFO community? I know you had your own experience before, but is that where it started, or as a child, or?
It was my life is weird, so I'll go over it and try to be as brief as possible, and you do what you want to with the story. So I had 3 cardiac arrests lasting minutes when I was just under 1 year old because I had a brain infection. And the doctors told my parents that I was not going to live, and that if I managed to live, I was going to be a vegetable. So my fever was like 105, and doctors thought I was done. And they says, we're going to try one thing. And they poured ice water through a tube into my stomach, and my fever broke, and I recovered. So shortly after that, I recovered. My parents got the opportunity to go down south, and we went, and I was completely fine. So I even remember driving to our new home just after 1 year old. I remember rounding the corner and pulling up in the driveway. So anyway, for the next 2 years, I don't have any real memory. But at 3 years old, I had a rough memory. Now, this memory came back to me late in life, but I had this rough memory that I woke up one morning and my mother found out I could read and didn't understand why. So I tried to see if this was a false memory by calling her and talking to her about it. And she told me the story that I woke up one morning, she and her best friend were drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes, and planning their next bridge tournament. And as I walked in, pulled books off the shelves and started reading them. And dude, I had zero instruction. So all of a sudden I was reading. And for the next 7 years, I consumed everything I could lay my hands on. And I absolutely bloomed at 10 years old. I built my own telescope from scratch. I became a ham radio operator. I learned Grey's Anatomy from cover to cover. I began helping my next door neighbor who was 5 years older than me. And the two of us, the 10-year-old and the 15-year-old, through his 18th birthday and graduated from high school, built the largest fossil collection in the state of Alabama. So I just had a weird childhood where I was, in my opinion, instructed from the other side or out there by some mechanism that none of us understand. But I could tell you now, looking back, that what I was getting during that time was downloads. So I graduated from high school, top of my class, A's in everything, and they gave me one medal, and I handed out the others to others because they didn't want to give me all of them because they didn't feel it would look right. I mean, so I was like really smart, and nobody understood where it came from. Okay, so my girlfriend and I, we went off to the same college, and about a month into the year, I picked her up from her dormitory and began driving us the 2.5 hour trip home. Well, we got home 3.5 hours after we started, 4 hours after we started, because along the way we had 90 minutes of missing time. And neither one of us understood what was going on. We woke up in the middle of a road at a stop sign. Neither one of us knew how we got there. We didn't make a big deal out of it because none of us had ever heard of abductions or et cetera. So we went home and said, I'm sorry, we got lost. It took us a while to find our way here, and here we are, we're fine. I don't know whether her mother believed me or not, but there you go. So within a month, I had decided I was no longer going to be pre-med and a doctor, that I was going to change schools to Auburn University, which is a very technical school. And I majored in mathematics and engineering, and that's my life now. For the rest of my life, as an adult, trained, I got a PhD in applied mathematics and engineering from Brown University, and then went into working for the federal government and serving the intelligence community, and did that for after spending a year at Sandia Labs. I decided to get the PhD because I saw that nobody but PhDs got any real respect in the 70s. So I got a PhD and went to work for the intelligence community, where I worked from 1984 on nonstop, but I had worked for a few years before that part time, nonstop until I was there for 27 years. And I led one interesting career. Not very unusual for a mathematician, engineer, egghead who spent 2 decades writing papers to all of a sudden, in a kind of an emergency situation, being asked to go to the field and do something odd. And it worked out well. I came home and thought, okay, well, that was interesting. I'll go back to what I was doing. I got called into one field operation after another for the next 11 years. And so I went from an egghead to a field operative. And
Wow.
so, I mean, I was recognized all over the place. And the director of Central Intelligence, when I stopped doing field work because I was nearly late 50s, awarded me with a gold medal the CIA gives out. So anyway, that's that. And then after a little while, I decided I wanted to change careers. I joined the faculty at Virginia Tech, started an institute where we trained young engineers, young scientists, etc., to do the kind of work that the intelligence community, Department of Defense, etc., or their contractors needed. And we had classified contracts with the government where the students got to work on the contracts on unclassified portions while they decided if they liked it enough to go get a security clearance. And we wound up clearing dozens of kids, and we rapidly became the most funded research activity at Virginia Tech. And I retired there in 2020 when COVID hit. But that was after I had started 2 companies and could retire.
Wow. So right
And
now,
then
retired.
while I was getting ready to go, 2016, I began to hear about UFOs because I was still really connected inside. So that went on until 2017, and To the Stars Academy came out, and my curiosity went through the roof. So I started watching Richard Dolan's and others. I became friends with Richard Dolan, and then I managed his forum, the Richard Dolan Forum, inside his activities, and I'm still the admin. So Richard Dolan and our friends, but I understood and because I was from the national security state, his national security state and the UFO books appealed to me. He interviewed Chris Bledsoe over 4 hours. I called Chris Bledsoe and asked him, could I come visit? That I was only an hour and a half away from him in Virginia. And I knew he had signed us visit him, and I'd like to come over. So it took him 3 weeks to get back to me, but he said, okay, you can come over. So I went over and spent 4 days with him. And shortly after I got there, he said, do you know how you got in here? I said, I just thought you decided it was okay and that you had been busy. He says, no, Jim Semivan told me to let you in, that it was almost surely going to be interesting. So Jim
Wow.
had been going to see Chris Jim had been going to see Chris for years.
Yeah.
And by then. And so Chris and I talked. He told me basically every single detail of his life story and his interactions with the phenomenon. And the last night it was clear. So we went out and observed, and we had hours of UAP and other interesting phenomenon. And there's this purple aura that was right over the trees. And I was looking up, and he was looking around, and it disappeared. And before I could say anything, he says, okay, they're gone, and we can go inside now. I mean, it's like I knew instantly that he was in telepathic communication with them because he was not looking at what I was looking at, and he knew when it was gone. So we went inside. I left and went home, had a hitchhiker follow me home and be in my life regularly for the next few weeks. I went and told Chris that I would do something he needed, which I did. And then the person I went with and I both had medical conditions, and each of us received a completely miraculous healing, which I no longer have the medical condition, and neither does she.
Wow.
And so this, I began to see orbs and craft and other things, and then I
Just
met Lala
in your
in my
regular life, you
regular
mean?
everyday life at home. And then because I was retired and had plenty of time, and I was in my yard looking through my telescope every night, so anytime anything weird happened, I saw it.
When was this? What year was the Chris that you met with Chris
2020 was
Bledsoe?
when the 2020 to 2022, I was experiencing stuff at home, and but I was trapped at home with COVID because we didn't get
Yeah,
the injection until like a year and a half after I retired.
got it.
And after that, I started venturing out and doing stuff. I met Lala. She and my mother had passed away. She gave me a reading, and it was clear that she was in contact with my mother and other relatives that were on the other side. She left me with zero doubts. And so we got together. We live together now in Maryland, and our every day is the weird.
Who you said?
Lala Bright.
Lala Bright, and she is your
She's a
partner, I
psychic
guess.
medium, been an
Oh,
experiencer since she was born. Her father was a Reiki master and instructed her in dealing with all of this. And they figure out what she was when she was very young. Their favorite next door neighbor passed away. They couldn't go to the funeral because he was a federal food inspector and had to go out of town. But when he came back, they went to the cemetery,
yeah.
and it's a huge cemetery in Baltimore, 10,000 graves if there's one. They had no idea where it was, but Lala got out of the car and walked straight to the grave and said, "Hey y'all, but Granny's over here." And they asked her how she found that, and she said, "Oh, I heard her calling me." And her father recognized what she was and became her instructor and mentor.
Wow.
And this,
And you said,
she it's not like she has a choice. You don't have a choice when you're abducted, and you don't have a
sure,
choice when you have psychic abilities. And she can do basically every contact modality you can think of, and is a pretty good remote viewer. She helps find missing people or helps forensics after the fact.
and you said she's in contact with your mother.
I can talk to my mother whenever I want to through her.
Oh, wow.
It's
Okay.
amazing. This is
That,
look. I know it's a strange life, and I'm
yeah,
not telling you anything except exactly what I'm experiencing because I'm kind of
sure.
this open book.
Sure, I understand. Yeah, yeah. Do you ever wonder, like, if your mom's gonna be contacting you without you initiating contact? Like, does that happen where she's like, "Oh, your mom wants to talk to you right now." Does that make
Sometimes I
sense?
can feel it, and then sometimes she says, "Your mom's here."
Your mom's here. Okay, yeah,
And
like
the
watching you.
strangest thing that happened when she gave me my initial reading is she says there's this little lady walk about 5'2" walking up to me, and I can't figure out what the heck she's saying but she's very animated, and because she has this thick Southern accent, and I can't understand her. She keeps saying this word over and over and over again, and I feel it's important, but I don't know if I'm getting it right. I says, "Well, what is it?" She says she keeps saying the word Tweety over and over and over again. And what does that mean? And I'm like, wow.
Wow.
Patrick, when I was 1 year old, my grandmother began to keep me. She called me sweetie, and I couldn't say the word, so I called her Tweety. And that was
Oh,
my grandmother's name until my
wow.
grandmother passed away. But
Tweety.
you have an experience like that, and all doubt is removed.
Sure. No, I mean that's fascinating. Wow. Okay. That's yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you found love in life. That is super important. I have it myself, and I know how strong a bond can be. So, I'm happy for you for sure. You know, you mentioned before about downloads. And I just want to make sure that people understand what that means. Or what are you implying when you say downloads? Like, I
Okay,
guess I don't want
so
to say it for you.
I've had multiple times in my life a sudden kind of inspiration, and lots of things flow into my brain, and I realize you just get this real sudden sense of knowing and this feeling of overwhelming exhilaration. And you're absolutely certain that what you're hearing is right, but you may not understand how to get there at all. So that's happened to me multiple times. And I'll give you one specific example. So in around 2015 or 16, I founded this company called Hawkeye 360. And that was after I had a download. In a different experience, I had this download, but I all of a sudden knew that I knew things in in intelligence collection that people had worked on and spent billions of dollars on for decades. I all of a sudden knew how to do it better from on orbit. So Hawkeye 360 is a satellite building entity that does geospatial intelligence on orbit. And it's done well. So it is the first commercial entity that has its actual spacecraft constellation incorporated and a part of the national satellite constellations that the National Reconnaissance Office manages. But through Hawkeye, we own the spacecraft, and what they do is task us with gathering data. And then the data flows into their spaces, and they distribute it to their customers. And so the National Reconnaissance Office builds all of our nation's classified payloads that go into orbit.
Wow. A lot of that is way over my head.
That's ever happened to.
Wow. No, I mean, a lot of that is over my head. I'm not going to lie. But the idea that...
Let me make it simple. These spacecraft fly over, they listen to transmitters on the ground,
okay,
and they can find out where they are to a square meter.
Oh, wow. Within a square meter, you said, like,
within a square meter,
margin of error.
Wow. Margin of error, they can find a transmitter on the ground. And the way it's done, it was brand new. People don't have to believe me. They go to the patent office and read my patent.
Sure. No, that's fascinating. So you found a new way to track that and bring the margin of error, I would assume, even, smaller, right?
And before me,
that's amazing.
Before me in the company, they were spending billions of dollars per spacecraft to do that job.
Wow. So wait, so you own a company that builds spacecraft?
I founded Hawkeye 360, and it builds spacecraft that does geolocation of transmitters from orbit.
You're kind of like Elon Musk here, Bob.
No,
you're kind of like an Elon Musk.
Elon Musk launched my first spacecraft for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy, what the hell? That's the coolest thing I've ever heard. What a flex, Bob.
When I started, I had no idea where it was going, and it just took off and went.
Wow, dude, what a flex, Bob. I would be saying that everywhere I went, I would let people know that. If in public, I would just stop random people and brag about that. So wow, what
that is rights. What it is. I'm on to doing other things. So when it's amazing. Relevant, I'll tell people the story. Like now, you want to know what a download was? That is what a download has been to me. I had a really good idea and turned it into something, and I have no idea where the idea came from.
That's amazing. So
let me give you another person that I know enough about to tell you I am certain that the 11 companies they have founded, they got the ideas from downloads, and that is Dr. Garry Nolan.
So, well, real quick, before we get to, I'm curious, what is your theory? You're saying you don't know where it came from, but do you have a theory on potentially where this information is coming from?
I don't know whether it's from entities from other dimensions or worlds. All I know is it's some consciousness talking to me, and I don't know the mechanism or who they are.
Got it. Okay. So from another intelligence, you're getting the information.
It feels like somebody's just sending stuff into my brain through a pipeline they have.
Wow. I mean, that's like the Matrix thing, right? Where they stick in the thing and he goes, I know, and he opens his eyes and goes, I know Kung Fu, right? essentially instantaneous. Right,
Nearly
right in.
instantaneous. Sometimes it can last a few minutes, but it's like reading the Encyclopedia Britannica in a few minutes.
Does it hurt
It's
when you get
literally
these
almost that
downloads?
much information
D-
sometimes.
do you feel any pain when the download happens, or any change in body or any? I'm curious. I don't know.
Say that again?
I'm saying, do you feel any pain when that download happens?
No. But it's just, I know it's happening and I just go quiet and let it happen. And when it's over, I start thinking about
Okay. Yeah.
it.
Wow.
And my
That's
talent has
fascinating.
been literally to assemble teams that can help me take the idea and make it real.
And clearly, you've literally put your money where your mouth is. Like, that's
Yep. And
crazy.
I've done that since I was in my 20s.
That's so you think you've been getting these downloads since you were 3, probably, right? When you
Yeah,
began to read, maybe?
the learning to read was clearly a download.
Yeah. That's
There's no other way to
fascinating.
explain it.
That's absolutely, I mean, fascinating, to be honest
I
with
mean,
you.
who do you know that can memorize Gray's Anatomy from cover to cover in 2 months?
Well, I'm not gonna lie, when you first said Grey's Anatomy, I'm thinking, wait, you memorized the TV show? Like, you watched all the TV show? I don't, I'm an
No, I bet
idiot.
the book.
It's a book. I realize that now as I thought about it that way. It's got to be a book or
Every
something. I've
medical
never read
student
it.
learns anatomy from that book.
Okay, so that's where that comes from, Grey's Anatomy. Okay, okay. See, I didn't know that. I don't pretend to know things I don't know or whatever. Okay,
Yeah,
no, that's fascinating. So you mentioned Garry Nolan has started 11 companies, you said, I think, or
I
12,
think it's
whatever,
11 companies. It's at
around
least
there.
it's a lot of companies.
A
But
lot, yeah.
the important point is we mapped the human genome, and the outcome of that activity is we now have a biomechanical device called CRISPR-Cas9 that allows us to modify the genome and fix genetic problems. The
Yeah.
path from mapping the human genome to CRISPR-Cas9 is littered with Garry Nolan's inventions.
Really? Okay, I've heard of CRISPR and all that. Wow, that's fascinating. I think I've looked into Gary Nolan a lot. I thought I knew a lot about. I didn't know that part of it. So do you think he's also getting them through downloads?
Yes, I'm pretty sure of it. And I already know he's an experiencer because he told me.
Yeah, he's. I've covered his childhood experiences that he had. Adult ones, I'm not sure. I can't remember if they were in there too. I think there was one, but no, that's fascinating. Yeah, clearly. Um, and he studies the. God, I don't know how to say it the right way. The caudate something.
Well, that was just a thing that fell into his lap because the government and Kit Green asked him to help them.
Yeah. Was it
And
because of a
he figured
specimen,
out
or was it the
he
Havana
had a
syndrome?
postdoc. He had a postdoc that was helping him scan brains to see if they could figure out what was causing Havana syndrome or what the damage was. And I think Kit Green or him or someone else slipped in a couple of experiencers, and he also slipped in himself and measured this caudate putamen enhancement and figured out, well, it's not because of Havana syndrome, but it is in every experiencer and telepath's brain.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that is fascinating, right? There's something very scientific and physical about that, and something that can be studied and measured, more importantly, repeatedly, right? And it's something everyone has that can be referenced or looked at. Well, yeah, I know. I all the studying into that and all the information that Dr. Garry Nolan has talked about that, even Lou Elizondo bringing it up in his recent News Nation interview. Yeah, I find that, fascinating. How many more other people do you think are, downloading like yourself, like getting this information? I mean,
Quite a few. The stories of Einstein's thought experiments, they pretty much seem like downloads to me. And remember, Newton was out just sitting there, and all of a sudden he figured out how gravity worked. So all of a sudden,
That's
but he didn't
interesting.
know how to do it. So he invented the calculus so he could write down how gravity worked. And there's like no hint for calculus before Newton just all of a sudden has it. I think Da Vinci and Newton and lots of geniuses get downloads.
Wow.
Not
What
that
you know
I
what?
am one, but I guarantee you I've had downloads.
Oh, that's I mean, that's fascinating. It made me think, okay, human beings get these downloads from, let's just say theoretically, this other intelligence. You think that other intelligence is getting downloads from another intelligence? Like a Russian nesting doll sort of thing? Or
Probably.
where do you think they get the
I'm sure
information?
it's like a Matryoshka doll. I'm sure it is.
That's interesting, right? Like, where does that end, or where's the origin of this knowledge? Which is fascinating to me. And it makes you
Daniel
question
Hoffman
everything
has
you've
an
ever learned or every
Daniel
idea you've ever
Hoffman has
had.
an Yeah, Daniel Hoffman has an interesting theory of consciousness that would easily look like nested dolls. And whatever you're a part of is a bigger consciousness than you are. And you and others are just a little part of it.
Got it. Okay. Wow. No, that I find that all fascinating for sure. The way our brain works, consciousness. I realize we don't. That is something we can all agree on. Even science, we don't understand it all. So
No,
there
we don't.
is. I mean, clearly. I mean, probably nothing on the on the. If we were to put it in a pie chart, right? I would imagine we know nothing, which is fascinating. What would you think? People like Luis Elizondo are getting downloads too? I mean, or do you
I
have to
don't know.
be
So, I mean, I listened to his story and I know he's had lots of experiences and so forth, but I don't know from what he says that he is getting downloads. I know he involved himself in this, and like many who have involved themselves in this stuff, he began bringing it home to himself and his family as a hitchhiker.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right. What kind of downloads? You say one of the downloads was you were able to read. Another download is information. This idea that you can then turn into this company, right? Are the downloads? Do you think they have a certain parameter? Or are they like downloading to you simple, basic information? You know what I mean? Like, can they download physical stuff to you? Meaning, like, just like in the Matrix, like kung fu, like kung fu now, like something physical, like you
Hasn't
didn't
been
know how to ride a
anything
bike, but now
physical.
you do.
Hasn't been anything physical with me. It's almost all intellectual and mental.
Into yeah, okay, yeah, for sure. I mean, look, we've all had an idea, we don't know where it came from or a thought,
Yep. Yep.
right? I mean, that is true. I've definitely, especially like I wrote music for a long time, and right, where do songs come from? You all of a sudden you're just playing, and these things just literally pop in your head. And I've always found that fascinating. Songwriters have talked about that for ages. You never know where a song comes from. Did you write it yourself? Where did it, you hear Paul McCartney be like, yeah, I wrote this song in 5 minutes. It just came to me. Candle in the Wind, Elton John, right? 5 minutes.
So
It's fascinating.
Grant Cameron went and visited Chris Bledsoe, and Chris
Yeah.
Bledsoe kind of went into a trance and said, "The music, the music. Pay attention to the music." And Grant began looking into music, and he'd never had an interest before. And he found almost all great musicians get downloads. And Grant wrote an entire book on musicians getting downloads.
Okay. Very cool. That is very cool. That would be cool to explore for sure. I'll have to check that book out.
Oh, Grant's such a good writer and good guy.
Yeah, Grant's a great guy. I've had him on, once before. I've been trying to get him on, but I know how he is with emails. I need to reach out to Nicole, to be honest with you, and get that set up.
Yeah. If you
There.
want to get Grant on this, reach out to Nicole. And
Yeah,
he really is busy.
absolutely. And I know he has all this stuff going on, and he's got even a cruise coming up that he's probably planning for, and
That's
presentations. There's
canceled,
a lot.
apparently.
Oh, it did. Oh
Apparently, that's
no.
canceled. He said so in
Oh.
the space that he wasn't going.
Oh man, I think Steve Bassett was going on that too. Man, that sucks. I honestly that especially if you put in time,
I don't think they had enough customers to do it.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah. All right. Well, that stinks. That stinks. Honestly, I feel bad for them for that, for sure. You mentioned Grant Cameron, and that's something that we talked about in the space, Bob, when you and I, first spoke, was Grant Cameron's interaction with Tim Taylor, which is a fascinating connection between Tim Taylor and Chris Bledsoe. And honestly, Grant Cameron came on and he undivetted and he talked about Tim Taylor a little bit. And it was the first I'd ever heard of him, really. And I started to look in. And in my opinion, I think Tim Taylor is, you know, the most fascinating character in ufology that's not really like talked about all the time. People do know him, and if you mention him, people will say something, but he's not really talked about very much. And I just find him fascinating because the way he connects. And you told me the story in an X space about him and Chris Bledsoe and kind of downloads and starting companies and this and that. It all kind of ties together here. Do you mind retelling that story?
I don't mind. So when the government began showing an interest in Chris, because of things they had heard from others, Tim Taylor came and visited, and he met Taylor at a UFO conference, and that Diana Pasulka had invited him to. And Diana Pasulka, Tim Taylor, and Chris Bledsoe all met each other at that UFO conference. And then Tim got interested and began to start visiting. And he brought a piece of a craft and didn't tell Chris or his family what it was about, but he put this piece of craft material or whatever it is in Chris's hands, and Chris had kind of an electrifying experience. He went rigid, was clearly interacting with this material, and the way I would say it is Tim Taylor was testing him if he had the ability to touch a craft and fly it. Okay, and so Tim went, "Why you? Why you?" And after that, began visiting quite a bit, involved Chris in interacting with other things. He took Chris inside of NASA and walked him down the astronaut exit that they take on the way to the pad into a conference room that only astronauts are allowed to go in. And I'm telling you, they treated him like he was royalty. I never heard of anybody being treated like that, but Chris Bledsoe and Tim Taylor was behind it. And then I got interested. I visited Chris and so forth and so on. And he showed me this picture, and I went, "Wow, Chris, do you know what this means?" And he says, "No." I says, "It means a lot." But I didn't say anything because I didn't know whether it was public or not. But I saw the picture on Grant Cameron's webpage, and that's when I knew it had gotten out. So I just said, "Wow, if it's public, I'm going to tell what it means." It was an envelope with a piece of paper, a napkin, covering half of the address on the envelope. But I recognized that the half of the address was Bledsoe's personal address. And the napkin was the presidential seal embossed with Camp David on it. Now, let me tell you, Pat, you cannot copy that, or the Secret Service will visit you and whack a mole you into the ground. You're not allowed to do that. So I just said, that, in my opinion, has to be real. And the implications are, given the year, that napkin, and what Chris told me was in that envelope, that Taylor had taken it and briefed Obama at Camp David. Because the only
Wow.
way you get to Camp David is just with a presidential invitation. And
So you
so
think
the
Tim
implications of
Taylor,
it were huge.
you're saying Tim Taylor potentially briefed President Obama at Camp David about this envelope that Chris Bledsoe had
which
sent, and
contained which contained a description of Chris's experience and his prediction for the future. which was something rough is coming and going to happen with a Middle East war and whatever. And nobody thought that Chris this was right. And here we are on the brink of war a year and a half before Chris says it's actually going to happen in the Middle East.
Oh, so what is the exact? Do you know the date
He
that
saw
Chris
he
is
was
predicting?
taken forward. He was taken forward to the future by entities, and he didn't know it was the future until he saw an astronomical event that they made sure he could see, and astronomers figured out the astronomical event happened in 2026 or something like that. And he saw a nuclear weapon being fired in the Middle East, and the
Oh no.
entities stopping them and ending the nuclear exchange.
Oh
And
wow. So
after
they
that,
saved the day.
apparently, every after that, according to Chris, everything will change because they will have shown themselves.
Disclosure, catastrophic disclosure at that point, right?
It's
They're out.
the
It's no.
disclosure on their schedule, not ours.
Yeah, for sure. Which
My
I'll
opinion,
be honest, don't
my
mind that.
opinion is the government believes.
Your opinion is what? The government what?
The
Believes it.
government believes.
Got it.
Yeah,
Oh, that's wow.
they've done an experiment, and I don't know whether they got that experiment from me, but I think they did because it was exactly what I described to Chris that he and I should do. I just think they had his house bugged and overheard it. Okay, so my suggestion was
All right.
for
Yeah.
them to go, for government people to go someplace and take cameras and point it at a random spot in the sky and make sure it was dark, and that Chris asked his pals from up there to show up in front of their cameras without knowing where they were. And to their surprise, it succeeded. And he's now regularly doing this all the time. People ask him, will he send these beings to show up where they are at UFO meetings and other stuff? And he's doing it all the time, successfully.
Wow.
But I am sure that's when the government began to seriously take him interest in it.
You're saying that the video showed the UFOs showing up and they didn't know where the cameras were.
Chris had no idea where the cameras were.
Or
The
Chris had
people
no, yeah.
running the people in charge of the experiment didn't know where the cameras were. And so Chris sent the UFOs right in front of the cameras.
Who saw the
demand.
videos? Like, have you seen these videos?
Some agent who was in charge of taking the videos.
He confirmed. Yep, they showed up in front of these. Do you think it was Jim
Well, they had the
Simi Band?
video. They know it.
Yeah, yeah. They can rewatch.
And after
They can
that,
rewatch.
he was asked to go to Monroe Institute. And after he got past lots of negative feelings that were there that doubted him, he and Emily went out to sat near a rock and asked the entities to come, and they showed up. And John Alexander was there, and a bunch of other people, and
Wow.
Bob Freeman, who was and others were there and showed up, and all doubt went away in this crowd, which included Sean Cahill and others.
Oh wow. Now I remember in this X space at the Monroe Institute. Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about Tim Taylor and Chris Bledsoe in that X space. We just didn't get to it yet, but you had mentioned that potentially they were somewhere working on something, and you think maybe Tim borrowed Chris's download and started a company, kind of like yours that you did.
I don't know whether I know this. Chris helped him with some medical stuff in Tim Taylor's laboratory. And subsequent to that, Taylor made a fortune, and Chris Bledsoe got none of it. The implications are pretty straightforward. I just don't have the final evidence to prove it.
Sure. Do you think Tim Taylor
broke off connection?
Oh, shortly after that, he just stopped talking to Chris Bledsoe.
Yeah, he stopped going to see him.
Wow. Like, kind of like, I got what I needed, sort of thing.
That's my suspicious former intelligence person belief, but I don't have
Sure.
the evidence to prove it. So I
Yeah.
just know that
Do,
it's strange.
I agree. I agree. Do you think Tim Taylor gets downloads on his own?
Yes, yes. Not in American Cosmic, Diana Pasulka describes Tim Taylor getting downloads. She calls him
Yeah.
Tyler, but it's Tim Taylor.
Sure. Yeah. It's Tim Taylor. Have you ever heard of, or is this like a regular occurrence that people will take someone else's download or the information they got from that download and sort of use it, or you know what I mean? Can you intercept someone's download? Is that possible?
I have no idea because I've never gotten anybody's and nobody's ever gotten mine. So that I
Yeah.
know of, but maybe I just don't know.
Sure. But this is the only story you know of something like this with Chris and Tim,
Yeah.
right? If someone sort of, that's
Yep.
interesting, right?
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Um, I'm fascinated by this download phenomena, to be honest with you. I have so many questions
Yes,
about
it
it.
is.
It's fascinating to me. You know, Grant always I keep wanting to dive into this next thing I'm going to bring up here to you. And I keep forgetting, and this term keeps coming up over and over again that I keep hearing, and the term is jump room. What does that mean?
Well, apparently the things I've read, because I have no personal experience of it and I've never witnessed it, but
Okay.
apparently it's like the portal room in Stargate. Like, in other words, there's the Stargate portal. People can go in there and move from one point to another instantaneously. That is the apparent story. And there's these rumors and stories that Obama went through it, and but I don't know the answer.
Oh shit.
I don't know if
Oh,
that's true, and that's one of the rumors.
sure, sure. No, that's fascinating. Have you ever heard like what's on the other side? Is it, I guess, another jump room, right? They're
No,
just like,
no idea. I mean, the big device that's in
yeah,
Stargate.
yeah. And
Apparently,
there's another
you
one,
go from
right?
one box to another, but I don't know the details because I've
Yeah,
never
yeah.
been there, never seen it, don't know who does it. I just know these rumors, and they're everywhere.
No, I've heard about Tim Taylor being in the jump room, Grant Cameron being in a jump room, and I keep forgetting to ask more questions about it. So, do you think there's actually like a structure, or do you just think like it's an empty room?
I don't know the answer.
Okay,
But
I'll ask the
let
same
me say,
question.
I
Look at
doubt
me.
one part of
Sorry.
I doubt one part of your statement. I doubt
Okay.
one part of your statement. Grant does not know a fact in all of this that he does not tell everybody. So if Grant had been in a jump room, you would know about it.
Yeah, that's what he said. He told me or said it. I think he said it in the podcast. That's how I heard about it. Was the jump? I'd
Oh, I
never
did
heard of
not
that
know he had
term.
been in a jump room. I missed that part.
I'm pretty sure I may have to edit and insert something in right here in this interview that corrects that or doesn't, right? I'll figure that out in post. But I definitely heard jump room from him. And Grant has way more stories to tell about Tim Taylor. Example. Grant,
Because then
this
we got
whole
to get
thing.
into the story about Tim Taylor telling me about the jump room at LAX. That's
Oh,
that.
dude. Yes. Okay. Yeah, we are definitely going to do another one here. I'll send down.
Yeah, I'm just gonna tell you that thing was so long I couldn't stay there the entire time. Like on occasion I had to get up and go to the restroom. But so he may have said it while I wasn't listening, but I did not hear it.
Sure. No, it was in my interview, I'm saying. Not at the Twitter space or whatever, but
Got
um
it.
this was a while ago, talking about Tim Taylor and being in a jump room. And gosh, I should have listened to that before our interview today to be more whatever. But no, I just find the jump room fascinating, for sure. Well, look, Bob, I would love to dive in a little bit further to something you said at the very beginning in your background. And that, first of all, you help serve our country for decades. Thank you for your service. I mean that genuinely. My father was in the Air Force. I was born in Omaha. Thank you for your service. So, but the very first time I ever saw you specifically, I'd never heard of you. And I'm watching Chris Leto's podcast. Like, I don't know, this must have been a year and a half ago or something. It was quite a while ago.
That's
And I
correct.
just, and this was, honestly, you're way ahead of your time, because at this time there weren't many stories out there about these USOs, underwater submerged objects. And all of a sudden I see this video, because I'm looking them up to make this other whatever thing I'm doing, and I'm looking for videos about this, and I come across your interview on Chris Leto's podcast talking about this experience that you had in service, right, in the 90s, I believe. I mean, you can correct me on all of this, and I'd like to just dive into that, because you had a USO experience really before anybody was talking about it. So I don't
Two
know
of
if you
them.
don't mind. Two of them. Okay,
Two
see,
of them.
this is new.
Yeah.
This is
So
new. Okay.
in the 90s, I did some work for the government that had me on the USS Hampton. And that is the beginning and the end of what I can tell you about what I was doing, except when we were in the middle of a downtime, we were down deep and moving. And all of a sudden, there was this rushing sound by the submarine. And it didn't disturb the water because we didn't get rustled around, but the senior master chief came out of sonar and said that something had gone by us that was huge, and it was moving, he thought, faster than the speed of sound in air, but it was so far underwater, it would have nothing we know how to do on the earth can move an object underwater at that speed, because water is incompressible. You can't compress it. Okay. And the reason, if you try to go fast, because if it's incompressible, it cavitates and makes noise, which is how submarines find you. Okay. So anyway, and of course the sonar was there and we heard it. And that was, the captain said, say nothing. And we said nothing. And that was the end of it. I was curious, but not allowed to talk about it. And I heard nothing about it after we got off. But I'm telling you, it happened. All right. So in 2008, I was doing an operation, and I happened to be on the USS Blue Ridge, which is the flagship for the 7th Fleet, which is based in Yokosuka, Japan. And so I was on there for months. And whatever I'm doing, I can't say, but one time we were on our way from the Manila in the Philippines to Japan. And we happened to go through parts of a typhoon. And it was 90 knot winds and 40-foot seas. So we were pretty close to the eye. And these ships they just can go right through this stuff. So we went through it. And I decided to ride it out in the bridge so I could see what it was like. And I just stood against the wall and kept myself out of the way. But all of a sudden, I was looking out the windows front from the bridge and could see that the rain had stopped falling on the ship. And I said, are we in the eye? And they went, no. So that really piqued my curiosity. So I walked up toward a window and looked, and I could see a glow above the ship. I couldn't see what the glow was, but I could see the glow. And the glow was bigger than the ship. And all of a sudden, as if it knew I was looking, the glow got brighter and boom, it took off. And the rain returned. So I cannot say that I saw the craft, but I can tell you I saw the light, and the light covered the entire 400 or 300 feet of whatever that length that ship is, and we had no rain on us. And it must have been pretty wide too, because the winds were 90 knots, and it would have blown rain a long way, and I could not see any hitting the deck. And that only lasted a few seconds. And I said, did you guys see that? And people went, what? And so whatever. And that was it. I mean, it was there and done in under 30 seconds.
That's that's fascinating. Yeah, no, I mean, at that point, don't you think the rain's coming in sideways?
Yeah, you would have thought, but
Almost.
none was hitting us.
Isn't that crazy? Like it's even stopping horizontal, like something, this
Yeah.
glow. That's
I'm
fascinating.
telling you, it was even stopping wind from blowing rain in. So later
Yeah.
on, I happened to be with Tim Gallaudet and others in a meeting in a little conference in New York City run by Jay King and his friends. And Tim gave a talk, and I says, talk to Tim, and says, I've been on the Hampton. And he went, wow, I was on the Hampton in 10 years after I had been in the Arctic. So he and we had kind of kinship because we'd both been on the
Yeah.
same ship. And I says, Tim, look, I have this feeling, given the stories we're hearing and my own personal experiences, which I told him about, and said, it's my feeling and opinion, given what we're seeing and hearing, that if a ship of the Navy goes out on blue water, which means deep water, they have
Oh, okay.
experiences, almost 100% of them. And he says, yep, I think you're right. And he's an admiral in the Navy and was charged of the weather for all the Navy when he was in the Navy. So and he spent time on carriers and other ships. And I bet you when he was head of NOAA, he got pictures of craft from the NOAA satellites. I bet he did, but he didn't say.
Wow. I mean, he's since come forward since you first told, your story, right? And kind of been the face of USO, right? In a lot of ways, at least getting that term out and that this can exist below the water, and potentially even being an origin of where, right? Because we don't, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a lot, right? Of how much of the ocean we've actually explored. I believe it's
small percentage.
Nothing, right?
We know
Yeah,
the moon better than we do we know the moon better than we do the ocean floor.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I believe there's a whole I mean, I think they were saying in between Europe and right the eastern United States, there's like a whole continent underneath the ocean that we have yet to explore. That's just one of the things, like you said, right? So, yeah, I mean, I find that fascinating for sure. What is there anything? Because you're someone that had a high security clearance. You're on this mission, classified mission. You experience this USO and you tell Tim Gallaudet, is there any is he wanting to tell your story or anybody wanting to put your story out there in some way?
I think
Or
he's gathering his own stories, but he now knows mine. But what he is doing is he's told us where the one of the biggest secrets in the Navy is about their sensor systems. But big events are recorded. And Tim knows where the recordings are kept and that every recording ever made is kept there. And so he knows where to go look for the recordings, and he is trying to get access to the recordings to do searches for big events.
got it. So, okay, I think for maybe people listening and watching who may not get what you just said, this may help, understand it. So, like, I think it was last summer, there was like a little submersible hand, whatever, right, that went down and people perished, right? It was like a tour thing, right? And
Going down to the Titanic.
yeah, going down to the Titanic, exactly. And I believe when they were doing the search, I remember hearing about in the news, they were trying to find like the sounds, like files or something that sensors were recording when the submersible collapsed, and that there would be some sort of sound from that. And they were trying to find, pinpoint its location based off that sound. Are these the type of sensors you're talking about?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, that's what I thought of. That helps me clarify. I think that'll help people too understand. Wow, that's fascinating because you're right. I mean, they're able to right. Oh, wow, that's fascinating for
I
sure.
mean, it is so sensitive. Probably almost everybody who cares about this knows the name of this system, but I won't say the name of the system. The
No, I
Navy's
don't want to say
really
it either.
the
Yeah,
Navy's really peculiar about that system. Except Tim Gallaudet told audiences that they found that sound about the submersible crushing, and they are so weird about secrecy. They did not tell the public until days later They
I remember
knew it
that.
had crushed.
Yeah.
They knew it had almost instantly, but it
Yeah.
had to go through all of the processes you have to go through to declassify it enough that they could tell the story, and it took days. They are
Sure.
very sensitive about that system because it's a rough world, and they're paranoid because they have reason to be paranoid. Our
Sure.
adversaries drive submarines right up to our shores whenever they want to, and we need to be able to track them.
Oh, I agree. I mean, if our adversaries sort of know right the parameters or the capabilities of what we have, then you can therefore build something to combat it, right? So it absolutely makes sense to keep that secret because then they don't know what they're fighting against. So yeah, I mean, 1,000%. And I remember hearing that story about the submersible because they were searching that whole time for those days when in reality they knew right away they had perished, right? But you're right; it had to go through that
The
process.
search team was out there, did not know, but the Navy sensor people knew. But you
Yeah,
got to remember how big the government is. The left
sure.
hand does not know what the right hand is doing.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It has to go, like you said, through all those steps. No, that's fascinating. So, okay, so these same sensors are probably capturing data on USO activity, right? That's happening and a lot, probably, right?
Yep.
That's fascinating. That I find that so fascinating. How do you? I mean, are you a believer in that theory that potentially they're have bases underwater or living underwater or
To me, it makes given the forces and stresses their vehicles exhibit, they were able to deal with. They could easily hide underwater, and that makes 100% perfect sense to me. That's the
yeah,
perfect place for them to be.
yeah.
And
No, I
if
agree.
I were them, I'd go as deep as I could go.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, absolutely. What a fascinating craft to have where if you're 1 foot under the water or 1,000 feet under the water, it feels the same, right? That's, I mean, fascinating. No, absolutely. Wow. What, to kind of get back to Tim Taylor here a little bit, you also mentioned something. We were talking about Elon Musk earlier. You also mentioned something about Tim Taylor and Elon Musk that I found fascinating and
Yeah,
SpaceX.
I saw a picture recently where Tim Taylor had a SpaceX logo on. And SpaceX is doing national security launches. And I think Tim Taylor has something to do with SpaceX's national security launches or NASA
Yeah,
launches. I mean, he could be doing both.
sure. Well, Diana Pasolka had famously tweeted out one time that she believed Tim Taylor was Elon Musk's SpaceX handler at one time and possibly still was currently, right? So that's always stuck with me. And I remember I found some images that showed his dragon logo emblem, and then on a SpaceX pod, it had the same emblem on it. You know,
Yep. Yep. Yes, I've seen the
so
photo.
yeah, right. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, and I find that fascinating. I remember asking you too. You took these great pictures. You went to the. I hope I'm saying this right. Was it an SCU conference? Is that how I'm calling it?
Yeah.
Is that the
Yeah.
what year was that? 2020
2022.
2022, and Tim Taylor was there,
Yeah. I talked to him.
right?
Yeah, I
You
talked to him.
talked to Tim Taylor.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah. That's, I mean, can you tell us a little bit? First of all, what
Well,
was your, I
I
mean,
just said, I'm good friends with Chris Bledsoe. I went over there to be a scientist and quickly fell into a friendship with him. And I just don't feel I can be objective around Chris. So I don't try to do any science with him. He's my friend, especially after he healed me and others.
sure.
And Taylor says, "Nice to meet you," and said, "Yeah, Chris and I had a lot of fun together." And then he went off to a meeting he had to go to, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him anymore. It was a very, very short interaction, and it had nearly no substance to it.
What does Tim sound like? Let's see, have like a Southern accent? Is he,
Just a
you know?
bit of one, but he sounds quiet and educated, but he didn't interact with anyone. He stood up against the wall the entire conference, not sitting with anyone.
Wow.
I
That's
did
that's
see
kind of
him.
weird, right?
I did see him talking to Travis Taylor and Garry Nolan.
I've seen the picture of Garry Nolan and Tim Taylor, and I've even used that in one of my videos before, and I realized you took that picture,
Yes, I
actually.
did.
And it's on your Facebook, and because you have other pictures of you standing with Garry Nolan and a bunch of people.
You know,
Really
John
cool picture.
Alexander, Melinda Leslie, Eric Davis,
Yeah, Eric Davis. Yeah.
and me.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's fascinating, and I remember you telling me too. David Grusch was there.
Yes. So the NGA representative to Space Force came to the meeting, and he walked up to me when I was outside, and he says, "Okay, you were one of the people I came here to meet." And I says, "Well, it's nice to meet you." And 3 other people were with him. I now know, but did not know at the time, that one of those 3 was David Grusch. And what they talked to me about was using the sensor systems in Hawkeye 360 to help with UAP work. And I went, "Oh, guys, look, that's going to be classified." And last week, I told us, "Look, I'm sorry, but last week, my clearance expired and it won't be renewed."
Wow.
And they were crestfallen. I knew they had come with one of the goals was to meet me and get me to help them, but I no longer could because everything they do is classified.
Sure. Wow. That's fascinating, right? That is. If you one more week, Bob. No,
Well,
I'm
they would have
kidding.
had to pick up my contract and clearance, because if you don't use it for a period of time, it evaporates, and then you got to go start all over again.
I got you. Okay.
And
Oh, that's fascinating.
it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to clear me as a new
Again.
person to the level they would have wanted me to be cleared.
I see. So how long did you have your security clearance for exactly?
From 1978 until 2022.
Wow. Wow. Holy, what is that? That's 44 years
Yep, I
of
started
a security
with a
clearance.
Q, which is top secret and above for the Department of Energy, and I worked at Sandia Labs. And I went off to get my PhD at Brown University, but I worked in the summers and holidays for the intelligence community. And so that was not Q clearance anymore, but TSSCI. Not DOE, but National Intelligence. And I did that work every year, part-time, until I joined full-time in 1986. And I stayed there at that place for 27 years.
Wow. No, that's so fascinating. I want to put a pin in Department of Energy. I want to ask you about that. But real quick, to finish up this SEU conference here, I remember you also telling me that you never saw Tim Taylor speak with David Grusch at this thing. And in fact, like you said, you didn't see Tim Taylor really speak to anybody except for maybe a couple people.
I saw him speak to Travis.
Yeah, well, a couple people. I mean, you know, he had a few conversations, but for the most part, it wasn't, you know, like he was around sitting with the group, mingling with everybody, right? Or he didn't give a speech. He didn't speak or anything, right? I mean, clearly.
No. He spoke nothing. But and just so people know, George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell were there, and they acted like they didn't know who Travis Taylor and David Grusch were. But of course, we know now that's where they interviewed Travis Taylor and outed Travis for being the chief scientist at UAPTF. And Jay Stratton was there, and I didn't know who he was.
Oh, wow.
I failed to take his picture, but he was there.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's fascinating. Do you think Tim Taylor is at a lot of these meetings or get-togethers? Do you think he's at a lot of these things?
I think that particular meeting was unique
Oh, really?
because of all of the people that were there.
That's interesting. So it was like a packed,
Oh,
you know, event
it was
here.
fabulous. Eric Davis and John Alexander and Tim Taylor and Travis and on and on and on. Experiencers, government people, and I mean government people who didn't want to be known as government people that I knew who were there. I mean, it was an amazing meeting.
What? And how many days did it last?
Two.
2 days, and it's just people giving presentations, right? One after the other,
Yep.
essentially.
And mostly networking and hanging out, but people gave presentations.
Yeah,
Sorry.
networking, of course.
And Matthew
Yeah, for sure.
Zadakis and Kevin, what's his name, were there, and they gave scientific papers on the phenomenon and a little hint at what they found with UAPX that eventually became a Terror in the Sky movie.
Oh yeah. Okay. Right on. I know exactly what you're talking about. Oh, please, no worries. No, that's what, one last thing here about the conference. What is there anything we didn't mention about that you felt came out of it or was interesting about it?
Oh Lord, yes. John Alexander gave 42,000 slides of his life. I mean, it was hard to watch because it just went on and on. But at the end, he stopped and took questions. I mean,
Oh, wow.
John's interesting, but I mean, it was way too much information for an hour talk. But anyway, so guy online asked Alexander what could he tell us about the Wilson documents,
Oh, the
and
Wilson
John
Davis documents, right?
Alexander, yeah, Wilson Davis documents, and John Alexander didn't miss a beat. He pointed at the back at Eric Davis and says, "Don't ask me, ask him. He's the author." He outed Davis as the author of the Wilson Davis notes in front of everybody on a worldwide distributed event.
John
Now,
Alexander on
I'm
stage.
pretty sure that was okayed, and the reason is later on we all went out to dinner, and I was at one table, and Eric Davis and John Alexander were at the table next to us, and they were buddy buddy. So Davis was not upset that Alexander had outed
Sure.
because he still had plausible deniability.
Yeah, he didn't say it, right? Eric, it's a way of saying it without saying it, essentially, right? I mean, the Wilson Davis memo is fascinating. So that's wow.
The implications are huge.
The implications are huge in that. You know, all right. I could dive into the Wilson Davis. I could do hours. I probably could talk to you about that. I do. You mentioned Department of Energy. I don't want to forget that pin that okay. I'm sure you've heard that the Department of Energy has brought up a lot in this topic and that potentially their involvement with this. What do you know, or do you know anything about maybe their involvement with this since you worked at the Department of Energy?
Here's what I am certain of, given what I know about the government.
Okay.
The best way to keep the events of 1947 as secret as they've been able to is to have it called nuclear energy and then kept under the Atomic Energy Act security system, because everything in that cannot be revealed to the public, and it has nearly infinite security lifetime. And now we hear people that were around saying that Oppenheimer and Edward Teller and others were the beginning of the secrets about the Roswell crash and others.
Wow. And you think maybe...
And we hear that the bodies from the Roswell crash were taken to Los Alamos, which was under the Atomic Energy Act, because it was where the nuclear weapons were designed.
Yeah. And you think the Department of Energy... Did the Department of Energy exist at that time?
Plays a continuing role in the secrecy.
in the secrecy. Was the Department of Energy started back in the 40s, like when Roswell happened?
The Atomic
47?
Energy Commission was, and they had control of nuclear weapon secrets.
And that turned into the Department of Energy?
Yes.
Got it. Wow. Okay. I've heard David Grusch talk about that too. I mean, other people, but I remember famously in one of David Grusch's, I think I think he's mentioned it multiple times, but I remember it specifically in the Jesse Michaels documentary that he made about David Grusch, that Grusch brought that up, a
Yeah, so
lot.
Q clearance is the same thing as top secret with the addition of critical nuclear weapons design information. So that's a
Oh,
Q
wow.
clearance.
Wow.
So if you have a Q
that's the
clearance,
top.
yeah, right at the
Right?
top.
I mean, that's huge, right? That's wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
my work at Sandia and Oak Ridge was involved with that, and I just
And
can't say anything else about it.
you had Q clearance.
Yeah, I had a
Wow.
Q clearance in the 70s and the Q clearance again in 2009 and 2009 and 2010. And then I let it lapse and went to work back TSSCI at the Classified Research Institute I operated at Virginia Tech with a partner.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. Wow. You've had a fascinating life, Bob.
It's
For
been
sure.
great. I've had a good time.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, not a lot of people knew it until I started talking about UFOs because I lived my life in the shadows for a long time.
Sure. Absolutely. Of course. Did you well, that's, this will be an interesting question, maybe not. Do you regret in any way sort of coming out with your story and talking about it and getting involved with the community?
So I retired and decided that I was going to talk about this stuff. And I got called multiple times to come work on Havana Syndrome and other secret work. And I would go, I would talk, they would see I had a clearance, and then they would try to get me in. And whoever was in control of my clearance wouldn't let them use me. So my talking about this caused the government to stop passing my clearance, and they kept it in limbo and on no contract, which have automatically renewed it until it expired. They made the decision to deprive me of use of my clearance. It's a typical kind of punishment they do.
All because you came out with this,
I was punished.
talking about this. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah,
I was punished.
that's reprisal. That is a reprisal, right, against you specifically for coming out and speaking about this. Wow. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Clearly not what you wanted to happen. Do you feel like your relationship with the government is sour? Yeah.
I was good. I was good at it, but I still have lots and lots of friends on the inside, and they don't treat me any differently. They just know I no longer have a clearance.
I gotcha. So there's no sourness between you and maybe potential past work you've done.
No. I have lots of friends from the inside. We just don't do any classified conversations, and I can't do anything to help them.
Sure, absolutely.
Many of them would like to, because if I work on a problem, stuff gets done.
I love that. Absolutely. No, that's great. Wow. Is there anything, Bob, we didn't talk about that you wanted to bring up, or, I tell you what, real quick, Lou Elizondo's book has just come out, and that's being talked about everywhere.
It's very, very interesting. I feel it has lots of interesting stuff in it that we didn't know, including how highly cleared he was and what he was cleared to. There is controversy now on the outside, serious controversy that is eventually going to have to be answered. And that is Lakatsky has poo-pooed all over Lou in public.
About
that's not good.
About his involvement with running OSAP.
OSAP and ATIP. Lakatsky says, "Look, I was in charge of all that. No one else was." I mean, it's pretty negative. Yeah. And I'm sure eventually Lou's going to be confronted with it. But I got to tell you, I learned a lot of stuff from that book, and people should read it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I've been promoting it on the show, a lot. And Lou has me blocked on Twitter. I a long time ago, he blocked vetted, and I've never commented on a post of his. I've never tagged him. I've never messaged him. I've never nothing. I nothing. So I was a little surprised by that. But hey, I keep, I've been promoting his book, and hopefully some people have bought it through that. But yeah, he look. I will say this. Lou went on Coast to Coast with George Knapp last night. Okay, and I don't know if you heard
Yep,
that
I heard it.
recording.
I listened to it.
You did? Yeah. George tried to
Yep.
maybe stick up for Lukatsky a little bit and say, like, I don't think he meant it. The comments he made and the way he meant it. He was getting asked for comments from News Nation and trying to get a photo from him. And they asked him about OSAP, and he just said that. But, I don't know. At the end of the day, it's still a little confusing.
All of UFO Twitter is going to interpret that the way you and I did. It was not positive.
For sure. Absolutely. And you're right. Everyone is talking about it. Jeremy Corbell's tweeted out about it. Lou even responded, right? And Lou said he doesn't really care. He's like, I don't care, whatever. That's that they're going to say it is what it is. He respects James Lukatsky and whatever. But yeah, no, I'm with you.
I'm not sure Lukatsky is clear of the insider secrecy.
That's interesting.
So we don't know where Lukatsky sits, but I guarantee you this, given what he was allowed to say on Weaponized, he was way up high in the secrecy.
Yeah, he said some things, didn't he? I think I remember I covered that too. This is the famous episode where he talked about we breached the hull of a craft, right?
And we've been inside.
Yeah, and we've been inside. Yeah,
we
exactly.
Have a craft and we have been inside. And that's what he was clear to say. He made a point of going over and over as George and Jeremy kept trying to poke him to go further. Yeah. He wouldn't go any further. Here's what I'm clear to say: we have a craft and we've been inside. That's all I'm clear to say, and that's all I'm doing.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's exactly how it went down. I remember covering that, and I found that fascinating because him and Colm Kelleher were promoting a new book that they had. I can't remember the name of the book specifically. But yeah, I remember that story. No, that's fascinating. So Lou's book, you got James Fox's documentary, The Program, coming out. I did a video on Jason Sands today, and I'd be curious to know your opinion on Jason Sands, right? He's going to be featured in the program coming out, James Fox's documentary. So I don't know. Have you heard of Jason Sands?
His credentials have been checked by people who have my complete trust, and he is what he says he was.
Okay.
I don't have access to any formal report on his interaction with the alien out near Nellis Air Force Base, but he is who he says he is. He worked for who he says he worked for.
Okay. No, that's good to hear.
Until I get further information, I'm just going to take him at his word.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited.
It is really hard. It is really, really hard to be a public liar where the lie you tell doesn't have the approval of the inside and you maintain a security clearance and continue to work. He has a security clearance and he continues to work.
Good point. That's definitely a good point. I'm super excited to see this documentary James Fox has coming out here. Have you heard anything cool about it or anything that you're looking forward to, or I don't know?
Well, yes. I've heard that the 40 are going to begun to be rolled out, and there is one or more. The 40 whistleblowers are going to be brought out and shown to the public.
In the documentary? Oh, really? Oh, wow.
No, not in the documentary. In testimony before Congress, etc., like a hearing.
Got it.
And there is more than one who everyone will know.
Is this the same person that Matthew Pines has been talking about? Do you know who that is?
I believe that to tell you the truth, nobody I know talk to knows who Matthew Pines is, but he is very knowledgeable. So he
Absolutely.
knows something. I don't know how he
Yeah.
knows it.
I have the same questions, Bob. Trust me. I
Yeah, I've
agree.
asked. Believe me, I've asked, but nobody I know knows who Matthew Pines is.
Well,
I see him on Twitter, and I've seen his interviews with Jesse Michaels and others, and I just don't know who. I don't know who he is, but he is replete with factual information.
yeah. Yeah, because he's talked about this person coming out that everyone will know. You've seen him in the news. So I'm assuming this is probably going to be the same person. And you feel that this person is going to testify?
Yes,
Wow.
and I think
Wow.
his name has already been in the news with this in the last 6 months. But I don't know for sure, so I'm not going to name him.
Okay, I was going to ask you if you throw out that name, if who you
I
think
have
it
a
is.
guess. I have a really good guess, but I'm not going to name them.
We don't want to say it's
I
just a
mean,
guess. We can't say that.
you have a former director of the Central Intelligence Agency that's gone on an interview and said this stuff is real, and we don't know what it is. I
Are
mean,
we talking
if
about
it's bigger than that, there are not many places to go.
yeah. All
Who
right.
does the director of Central Intelligence work for? How many people are above him? Not many.
Yeah. Who was that? What was his name? I can't.
John Brennan.
Matt Brennan. That's right. John
John
Brennan.
Brennan.
John Brennan. Yeah. I know. I think I know what clip you're talking about too. So you think it could be him coming out? I've thought him too.
Yeah, I mean,
I
he
thought that
hung
too.
his head down. He hung his head down. He says, "Yeah, we're seeing this stuff. We don't know what it is, and so forth." And that's from the director of Central Intelligence.
You're right. I remember that. He's in his office. I remember that. And I know exactly what you're talking about.
So let's say we take a concrete issue. The Navy has reported that a lot of its pilots have seen unidentified flying objects. And if you're tackling that as a CIA director or someone who works there, what is it you would sift through and interpret? How would that go?
Well, I've seen some of those videos from Navy pilots, and I must tell you that they are quite eyebrow-raising when you look at them. And you try to ensure that you have as much data as possible in terms of visuals, also different types of maybe technical collection of sensors that you have at the time. But then you also, I believe it's important to reach out into other environments and find out, well, were there any type of weather phenomena at that time that might have in fact created the appearance of the phenomenon that you're looking at? Were there some things that were happening sort of on the ground or other types of phenomena that again could help explain what seems to be quite a mystery as far as what it is there? But I think the important thing for analysts to do is not to go into this type of challenge, either discounting certain types of possibilities or believing in advance that it is likely X, Y, or Z. You really have to approach it with an open mind, but get as much data as possible and get as much expertise as possible brought to bear.
So at the end of all that sifting and interpreting, what do you think is the most likely hypothesis?
I don't know. When people talk about it, is there life, other life besides what's in the States, in the world, the globe? Life is defined in many different ways. And I think it's a bit presumptuous, if not arrogant, for us to believe that there's no other form of life anywhere in the entire universe. What that might, be is, I think, subject to, a lot of different views. But I think some of the phenomena we might be seeing continues to be unexplained and might in fact be some type of phenomenon that is the result of something that we don't yet understand and that could involve some type of activity that some might say constitutes a different form of life.
But being an agnostic, you don't think it's something supernatural?
Well, supernatural. Again, it's in the eye of the beholder. Um, I'm not going to discount things. That's why I'm an agnostic as opposed to an atheist. I just want to leave my mind open as to what something might be. But who knows what these things might be.
You've worked at kind of the level I worked at, you know a lot of people. So there have been multiple people in the news who I have not talked with who are claimed to be in charge of the recovery programs for some of these three-letter entities. And one of them, I know the person. And we've not talked about it, but I know them.
That works for.
They might have been involved with things. They might have been involved with things I've been involved with. But I don't know that they're in it. But I know an entity has been named that this person was in charge of, and I know them personally.
You know a person that worked.
This stuff is wild.
You know a person that worked in the UFO recovery program.
At the entity they claim are involved in crash retrievals.
Yeah.
And I would out them, but except I don't know for sure. I'm not going to put this person in the spotlight until I know for sure. Though others that put this person in the spotlight.
Sure. Wow.
But I know this person.
And you've talked to them about these recoveries or the program?
No. That's the reason I won't say anything.
Sure.
Is I have not talked to them
about this. Got it.
I haven't asked them to confirm or deny.
Sure. Okay. I see. Have you ever?
But it's interesting. It's really interesting.
Have you ever spoken to anyone that's been in the program or a program?
I have spoken to people that I am sure were on the inside. While I was working and cleared, I never had access to this problem in any way, shape, or form. I never worked on it at all.
Yeah. Well. So in your experience of working with the government, to you, it is possible that these programs could exist and probably do exist, right? To reverse engineer alien technology and retrieve craft that have been either crashed, abandoned, donated, whatever the term you want to use, shot down. And that's possible to you with your work in the government.
Grusch told us how it was hidden and how it was paid for. He told us.
Yeah. So that seems plausible to me. I mean, I have no experience of working in the government, right? So my opinion is kind of moot.
Oh, yeah.
But as someone with your experience,
yes. I've been in the deepest, darkest, blackest holes you can be in. Not on this problem, but on others.
Sure.
And I know the mechanisms having been in them.
And to you, it is plausible.
And these non-disclosure agreements, they're awful. They are. If you open your mouth, there's nothing you can do to protect yourself. And if you're asked by anyone, you're not allowed to say, I won't comment. The only thing you're allowed to say is the lies they tell you to tell.
Oh.
You are required to lie.
That's interesting.
If you're asked about it.
Wow.
And that's not this stuff. I mean, it's a thing like it.
Sure.
It's one of these deepest, blackest programs I've been in. And the NDA says you got to lie. You don't tell who sponsors. You don't tell the name of the program. You don't tell what it was for. If asked about it, you lie and report them.
Did you lie at any point during our interview?
No. So you didn't ask me about one of those programs.
No, I know. Wow. That makes sense, though. If I'm the government, I'm also, that's the process I would want, right? That because saying no comment is kind of admitting something already. So lying entirely about the whole thing, right? Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I'm with you. And look, I as an American that lives my daily life, not really thinking about the machinery behind me that makes this all go. Right. I think most Americans don't think about it. We do need to respect national security and a lot of the secrets that we keep.
Absolutely.
Right. It is important.
I guarantee you, look, I want to guarantee, Terry, you and others, there are reasons to keep secrecy. And that's because there's a lot of assholes in the world that want to hurt us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
They definitely do.
Sure. No, I agree. I agree. I'm with you there. And that's the problem, right, with disclosure at this point is fighting what secrets and to what level to bring that out into the public at what cost. And that's, yeah.
Patrick, there's no doubt that people that have listened to this have heard things mentioned that with just the slightest bit of imagination, you could see how it would be turned into a weapon. And we just cannot give that to an adversary.
Sure.
We have to be careful.
Yeah. No, I agree. I totally agree. So what is your position then on like the UAP legislation? Do you support that? Do you want disclosure from our government?
I want disclosure, and I want responsible people who are independent and part of the executive branch to be given control over what can be released. What I want to end is the illegal funding and illegal secrecy. And the UAP Disclosure Act, it didn't give us everything, but it did do one thing. No taxpayer dollar can be spent on these programs as of last December, because Biden signed the NDAA, and the part of the UAP Disclosure Act that lived was no more federal money on this program.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, Bob, is there anything here before we go that you wanted to bring up?
I just want to say that I hope your audience got something good out of it, and it was a pleasure being on with you.
Oh no, this was fascinating. Are you kidding me? I forgot we were doing a podcast there for a minute, Bob. I was just enthralled in talking to you and listening to you. So I had to forget. Oh wait, people are gonna watch this. I gotta ask some questions, Patrick. Get in there. No, I've super enjoyed this conversation. I look forward to another interview or conversation, really, to be honest with you, Bob. No, I really did. This is great. Bob, do you want to tell people maybe how they can connect with you or follow you online or whatever you want to promote?
Sure. I'm on Twitter X / Twitter with Bob McGwier. There's the spelling down there, _ N4HY, which is my amateur radio call sign. I'm on Twitter, and I'm Bob McGwier on Facebook.
Nice. And I'll put links in the description so people can just click on it too easily if they want as well.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, Bob, again.
That and Lala and I run a YouTube show every Tuesday night called Orbis, ORBIS Paranormal.
Okay, I'll put a link to that in the description as well. Please go check out that show. What do you guys talk about on the show?
We interview people that are as weird as us.
I love it. That's awesome. Wow, I love that. Then I'd fit on perfectly because I'm weird as hell. So that's awesome. No, that's great. Again, I'll put links in the description. Please, people, go check out Bob and everything he's got going on. No, that's amazing. Again, Bob, thank you so much for coming on and just being open and honest. And I love conversations like this. So I really do appreciate it.
Yep. I try not to dodge too much.
No, you didn't dodge at all. Are you kidding me? You did great.
I just don't want to go to prison, so that part I keep secret.
That's a good reason, man. That's a good reason. All right, Bob.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.